Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Muttalib ibn Hashim ibn Abd Manaf ibn Qusay ibn Kilab ibn Murrah ibn Ilyas ibn Mudar ibn Ghalib ibn Fihr ibn Malik ibn al-Nadr ibn Kinana ibn Khuzaymah ibn Mudrika ibn Ilyas ibn Mudar ibn Nizar ibn Ma'ad ibn Adnan. These are exact 20. We do not have much information about all of these 20. Our Prophet ﷺ said, Inna Allah astafa kinanata min waladi Ismail. Allah chose Kinana from all of the descendants of Ismail. Wastafa Qurayshan min Kinana. And he chose Quraysh from Kinana. Wastafa min Qurayshin Bani Hashim. And he chose the Banu Hashim from the Quraysh. Wastafani min Bani Hashim. And he chose me from the Banu Hashim. That the lineage of our Prophet ﷺ is the best and the most noble lineage ever. As for Kinana, the name means the pouch that you put the arrows in. Why was he called Kinana? Because he was known for his bravery. He was known as being a repository of ilm, of wisdom, of knowledge. It is said in the books of history that people would do Hajj in order to meet Kinana. Kinana lived a very long life, and he has certain sayings still recorded in classical Arabic about statements of concise wisdom. There are 3 people who can be called Quraysh. 2 of them are the real contenders, and that is, number 1 is Fihr, and number 2 is An-Nadr. So either 12 or 14, one of these 2 is Quraysh. They say that An-Nadr is the big Quraysh, and Fihr is the middle Quraysh. Qusay, who is 5 generations, is the minor Quraysh. The actual tribes of Quraysh, all of them combine at Fihr. The 10 people who were promised Jannah, Ashara Mubasharun, if you go back to their lineage, it's actually Fihr where they all combine. So therefore it seems to be Fihr is the person who is Quraysh. Quraysh, what does it mean therefore? One opinion is that Quraysh comes from the term to trade, because the Quraysh were involved in trading. Another opinion is that Quraysh Yaqrishu comes from gathering together, because the Quraysh were in different areas and one of their ancestors combined them in Mecca. And a third opinion, which is narrated in Al-Tabari, that Quraysh comes from conquering, because there's a long story where Quraysh will conquer other tribes. Qusay is the star of the Quraysh, that's why he's called the minor Quraysh. Qusay lived around 400 CE. He wrestled back the power of the political city of Mecca into the descendants of the Quraysh. Who was in Mecca at the time? The descendants of Adnan, i.e. not a Qurashi, the tribe of Khuza'ah. The Khuza'ah had taken over Mecca from the ancient Arabs that Ismail had married into, and that is Jurhum. Qusay managed to win over the tribe of Khuza'ah by a very smart tactical move. He married his daughter. He then demonstrated his skills over and above the sons even of the chieftain of Khuza'ah. And therefore when the father died, the people wanted Qusay over the sons. Because of this, he managed to actually go to war, and he called in the descendants of Fihr, i.e. the other Qurashi tribes. And this is now the gathering. Some people say this is why Quraysh is called Quraysh. And he fought the tribes of Khuza'ah, expelled them. So he took over Mecca. What else did Qusay do? Built the Darun Nadwa, the parliament. He also took custody of the Kaaba, and he assigned responsibilities that trickle down. The responsibility of water, the responsibility of hospitality, the responsibility of diyafa or guests, the responsibility, the keys of the Kaaba. This also indicates that Qusay was the one who began the institution of taking care of the Hujjaj. So the Hujjaj would get free food and water. Qusay would facilitate the actual Hajj rites as well. He would light a fire for the Hujjaj in Muzdalifah. They could then use that fire to take their own to the local tents. He dug a well to provide water for the Hujjaj, because there was no Zamzam in the time of Qusay. When Khuza'ah attacked Jurhum and Jurhum realized they're going to lose, they buried the well of Zamzam. So for over 300 years at least, the people of Mecca were forced to get water from other sources. Qusay was buried at Hujun, the famous graveyard of Mecca. He was the first person to be buried over there. His son Abd Manaf, his actual name was Mughira. Manaf means that which is raised. Abd Manaf was known for his handsomeness and his leadership skills. He became famous even in the lifetime of Qusay. Abd Manaf was handed many responsibilities and he was beloved to the people. His son Hashim is of course where we get Banu Hashim from. His actual name is Amr. Hashim comes from Hashama, which means to grind, because he would grind the barley and present food to the pilgrims. And it is said that Hashim never ever ate food alone, that if he was ever eating food, he would just call anybody to eat with him. Hashim did perhaps the most important thing to raise the economic level of the Quraysh. He instituted Rihlat al-Shita'i wal-Sayf. He came across the very simple idea that everybody's coming to us in Hajj. Why don't we sell them the merchandise they'll need? You want Indian stuff and African stuff? Well, then you go to Yemen. And we'll go up north to get the Roman and Persian goods, because there's the Silk Route. It went through Damascus and Basra. So he just hooked up to the Silk Road. And he made a lifeline all the way down to Yemen, and smack in the middle is Mecca. And so Hashim became extremely wealthy. This wealth created jealousy, especially amongst his brother Abd Shams and his nephew Umayyah ibn Abd Shams. This rivalry between the Banu Umayyah and the Banu Hashim was established in his time. Hashim married a number of women. One of his wives and the great-grandmother of the Prophet ﷺ was from Yathrib. So Hashim died on a trading trip to Gaza. Hashim is buried there. And his son, because his father had died, his mother took his most important son to her hometown of Yathrib. And so the Prophet ﷺ's grandfather was raised in the very city he would migrate to. What's his name? Abdul Muttalib, but it's not his name. His name is Shaybat al-Hamd. Shayba is whitish hair that old people have. So he was born with a whitish streak. So they said this is the Shayba of praise, Shaybat al-Hamd. One day it is said that the uncle of Shaybat al-Hamd, and his name is Muttalib, was visiting Yathrib, and he saw Shaybat al-Hamd, and he said, this is my blood. And he basically literally abducted the child. And he rushed back to Mecca, and when the people saw him with a young lad, they assumed the young lad was a new slave he had purchased. So that is why they called him Abdul Muttalib. The three main things that happened in the lifetime of Abdul Muttalib is, number one, the rediscovery of Zamzam. Number two, his vow to sacrifice Abdullah. And number three, the incident of Abraha and the elephants. So we understand why Zamzam was covered up, and how therefore did Abdul Muttalib discover Zamzam. Allah showed him in a dream. He took his one son and began digging till he struck water. When the water began bubbling up, the Quraysh surrounded him. They said, this is our property now. War is about to break out. And that's when he makes a vow to Allah that, oh Allah, if you ever give me 10 sons to defend me, then I promise I'll sacrifice one for you. But they don't want to fight him. They agree to go to a fortune teller. On the way there, they get lost actually, and they're about to die. So much so that Abdul Muttalib says, each one of you should dig his own grave because we're too weak to bury each other. As Abdul Muttalib is digging his own grave, he strikes water again. His cousins and distant Quraysh said, this is a sign from Allah that the water is yours because this water saved us. So without going to the priestess, they then come back, voluntarily gave the rights of Zamzam to Abdul Muttalib. And then of course, as we all know, eventually Abdul Muttalib has 18 children. Zubayr, Abdullah and Abu Talib were from the same mother. Then Abbas and Dirar from another mother. Then Hamza and Muqawwam and Hajjal from another mother. And then Abu Lahab all by himself from one mother. Safiya, Atika, Hakim, Umayma, Arwa and Barra. When all of these sons reach adulthood, he tells them to vow, and he says, look, I'm a man of my word, Allah bless me, and I have to give one of you up to Allah. He took Abdullah in front of the Kaaba. The Quraysh said, you cannot do this, he is the most beloved. Why don't you go to such and such priestess and see if there's a way out? And that is when the life of a person became equivalent to 100 camels, which is still the Sharia to this day. And then the story of Abraha. Abraha was the governor of the Najashi in Yemen. He saw his people every year go north. He said, where are you guys going? We have to go do Hajj. Why? What is there? There's the house of Allah. He said, I will build you a house that is far better than any of your houses, and you will come for Hajj under here. So he built a massive cathedral because they were Christians. When one of the Bedouins heard this, he went there to relieve himself. He became so angry, Abraha, as revenge, I will destroy this house, so people must come to my house. He gathered together his army, and of course, because they were from Abyssinia, so they had elephants, and he went with his army of around, some say 8 and some say 20 elephants. The chief elephant, by the way, his name was Mahmud. When he got to Mecca, he captured the livestock of Abdul Muttalib, over 200 camels and sheep. Abdul Muttalib came. He was a tall man. He was handsome and admirable. So much so, it is said, when he entered into the tent, that Abraha was in awe of this man. He said to Abdul Muttalib, I have no problem with you. You just get out of the city and I'll destroy your house. And that's when Abdul Muttalib said, I didn't come to you to talk about the house. I came to you to talk about my camels. Abraha lost all respect for Abdul Muttalib. That's when Abdul Muttalib gives the one-liner punch. The house has a Lord who will protect it, and the camels have a Lord, and it's my job to protect the camels. Abraha gave the camels back. After making lots of dua, Abdul Muttalib is pleading in front of the Kaaba. They then left to the mountains. They faced Mahmud to the Kaaba. They whipped him, they beat him, they bled him. The elephant would not move, but whenever they turned him in any other direction, he would move in that direction. And as they're debating what to do, that is when large birds came. Imagine stones from Jahannam in this world. Every stone hits an animal and a person, and he literally dissolves. Abraha himself suffered the worst fate. He dies right before reaching his home